Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
Some people live their lives not fully appreciating what others do for them. They start taking things for granted, thinking that that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Parents sacrifice a lot for their children, and when the children appreciate and try their best in life, that would be worth more than any words can ever describe. My name is Megan, and I hope to inspire you with my story. I lived with my father and my sister Marlene after the death of my mother, who died from an illness. Though I was only 18 at the time, I became responsible for taking care of the whole family. I did everything for them: cooking, cleaning, washing. My father was a great man, and he did his best to make us happy. I supported both my sister and my father. We faced everything together. There was one more person in my life, my neighbor, Dave. We practically grew up together, and our dreams grew with us. He knew everything about our circumstances and supported me often. He proposed to me and we got engaged. Dave chose a flat near my family so we would be close to them. That was very thoughtful of him. We got married and started our lives. I was determined to finish college, and Dave helped me in every way that he could. He proved to me every day how responsible and considerate he was. One day, while cleaning the house, my heart started beating rapidly, and I couldn't breathe well. I was barely able to call out to Dave, who came immediately when he heard me cry for help. I had had this symptom before, when I was younger, but I never told my father, because I didn't want to worry him. Dave took me to the hospital, where a doctor said that I had a serious heart condition. And not just that, I was pregnant too. Pregnancy and a heart condition do not make a good combination, so we had to choose between the baby's life and mine. My father and Dave asked me to abort the child. Though they tried really hard to persuade me, I resolutely refused. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy. They were all so worried for my safety. My father and Marlene left their flat to come and live with me, and Dave cut back on his working hours to stay with me. When the day came, they took me to the hospital. The doctor checked the condition and said that it was too serious, that I wouldn't be able to survive the childbirth. My family and I were shocked. I held Dave's hand and told him that I was strong enough to make it. Dave hugged me and cried. I was so afraid, but I did my best to hide it. I said to my baby, "I'm trying the best I can. I'm fighting so that both of us could have a life. Know that I love you, and I know that you'll grow up to be very successful, but you'll also be caring and kind." Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him, and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself. He was a dream, the future, or so I thought. But my love was cursed right from the start. Sounds a bit confusing, right? Let me explain. But first, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Carolyn. I was a dreamer. I dreamed of a good, warm, stable, successful life. I wanted a good job. And I wanted to travel around the world a bit with Helen. She was my best friend. We virtually shared the same dreams, and hobbies, and interests, and lifestyles. We've been friends since we were kids. People often thought that we were sisters. I did too, in fact. She even got jealous if anyone tried to get close to me. Every day, Helen and I worked a little more towards our dreams. Once, when Helen and I were traveling with some of our friends, we had a problem with the hostess on the plane. A gentleman intervened and cleverly solved our problems. His name was Danny. I liked him. A lot. I thought about him often. But whenever I talked to Helen about him, she told me that he was not as amazing as I seemed to think he was. Coincidentally, I met him again at a party of a mutual friend. We talked together till daylight. I told Helen about our encounter, and she expressed her wishes that my love story would have a happy ending. I similarly told her that I hoped she would find the love of her life someday too. Everything would be okay, we figured. Then, one day, I received a letter in our mailbox. It was in weird handwriting, as if the writer had written it with a trembling hand. I opened it curiously. It said that my love for Danny would become a curse if I didn't give him up and get him out of my life. What nonsense, I thought. Whose idea of a silly joke was this? I immediately called Danny and Helen to tell them about the letter. Danny laughed, but Helen was worried and suggested that I should be careful from now on. That same day, Danny had a horrible car accident, but fortunately he wasn't hurt. A detective investigating the case determined that his car brakes had been tampered with. In another incident, a car almost hit me, but it swerved away at the last minute. When I mentioned this incident to Danny, he tried to calm me down and told me to just forget about it. He gave me a beautiful bracelet as a present and proposed. We got engaged, and I couldn't have been happier. I wanted to show the bracelet to Helen, but somehow I seemed to have lost it. I couldn't find it anywhere. Anyway, when I told Helen about his proposal, she was thrilled for me. I spent days shopping for just the right wedding dress. I was so busy with preparations that I forgot all about the ominous letter. I went to the wedding hall early to make sure that everything was ready and prepared. Helen was helping me, and Danny kept calling me to make sure I was all right. Suddenly, the lights went out. I called out to Helen, worried that she might have tripped and fallen when the lights were out. When the lights came back on, Helen had fainted, and my dress had disappeared. I screamed to the ceiling, "What do you want from me? Leave me alone!" Suddenly, Danny appeared out of nowhere and asked me what had happened. I told him, then and there, that we must break off our engagement, otherwise the curse the letter mentioned might injure someone or cause someone to die. Then Helen came too and tried to calm me down. She told me to go to the car and that she would get our stuff and follow me. I loved Danny and wanted to marry him, but now I was seriously worried that this curse threat might actually be real. Helen came back carrying a bag and a large suitcase and told Danny not to worry, that she would drive me home and then call him to tell him that we had arrived safely. I was still crying, and Helen was trying to calm me down. When we arrived home, I noticed something strange. Helen was carrying a bag that was partially open, and I glimpsed a piece of clothing stuffed into it. It looked exactly like my dress. I opened the bag and found that it was my dress. I confronted Helen and demanded to know how my missing dress ended up in her bag. I clearly caught her red-handed, and she was unable to answer coherently. I realized at that moment that the source of the so-called curse was Helen. Helen, I said, how dare you do this to me? I thought we were like sisters to each other. She replied icily, with a glare that I saw for the first time. She said that she fell in love with Danny just as I did, but he chose me instead of her, and that she hated me for it. She said she won him over and got him to love her instead. Then they both tried to scare me into calling off the wedding so that she and Danny could be together. There are no words to describe how I felt at the time. I replied in a similar tone. I told her that I don't ever want to see her again, or Danny. Neither of them mattered anymore. I never did see Helen or Danny after that day. I'm on a Caribbean island now, sipping on a cocktail. I read in the paper that Danny and Helen had announced their engagement. I'm thinking about what wedding present I should give them as a surprise. One of the best feelings in the world for any woman is being a mother. To have someone love you for who you are, for just being you, and expect nothing in return. You're the heroine of their story. You become everything they ever dreamed, and you'd give anything to see a smile on their face. I'm proud to say that I'm a mother to 50 kids. I know, that's a lot, but let me tell you the story. I'm Susan, 20 years old. I come from a very rich family. My dad's Stefan Heiss, a very famous businessman. Yes, the owner of Heiss Cars Industry. My mom's Elena. She comes from a very rich family in Sweden. She married my dad and they built their life from scratch. I loved kids, ever since I was a kid. Sometimes I feel like they're walking cotton candy. Their laughs, their mischief. All the kids in our family loved me, and I loved them. Even my aunt said that I'd make a great mother someday. So did Henry. Henry was my childhood friend. We grew up together. We had the same interests, same hobbies. We even thought alike. We got married and started our life together. We were young, but our dreams were big. I was thrilled when I found out that I was pregnant, and Henry was so happy he couldn't believe it. He did everything he could to help me relax. He couldn't wait to be a father, but destiny had something else in store for us. We had just arrived from Sweden. Henry had a problem at work. He was talking on the phone while driving at high speed on a dangerous road. I tried to tell him to watch the road, but it was too late. A truck came out of nowhere and pushed our car off the side. We fell into the lake, and we were unconscious. When I woke up, I found my mother and Henry's mother both looking at me, trying their best not to cry, and I soon found out why. In order to save my life, they put me through an operation. Not only have I lost my child, but I won't be able to have one ever again. Henry was also bruised, but my wounds ran way deeper. That was it, and I could never forgive him. If it weren't for him, none of this would have happened, I thought. None of it. I got a divorce later, after Henry tried over and over and over to fix the situation, to apologize, to ask for a second chance. But all I saw were empty words. There was no second chance. I tried to keep myself busy, find a way to invest my money and time, trying to get my mind off the accident. I decided to open up a toy store. I wanted to bring joy to all the children. One day, as I was standing in my store, I glimpsed a small boy standing out front, looking at a toy. The boy was alone, about 8 years old, but that wasn't all. His clothes were patched up and looked more like rags. His face and hands were dirty, and he just stood there, looking at the doll, daydreaming. I found myself walking out to him, but when he saw me coming, he ran away. A few days passed, and that boy's gaze was all I thought of. Then, one day, I found him outside the store again, looking at a different toy. I moved towards him slowly this time, till I was right beside him. Then I said, "Do you like it?" The boy freaked out and tried to run again, but I caught his arm this time and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm Susan." The boy looked at me, terrified, and I smiled. He started to relax. He told me his name was Billy, and that he was 7, and that he lives nearby. When I asked him about his parents, he said he never knew them, that he lived with Uncle Max. I asked him who Uncle Max was.